On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have Erin McFarlane. She is the head athletic trainer for the Washington Spirit in the Women's National Soccer League. Erin was a graduate assistant with me back at UW Lacrosse, and it's been fun to see how she's skipped across the country over the last couple of years to end up really where I think she wanted to be, working with extremely high-level soccer. In this episode, we talk all about that transition, what she's learned along the way in her different settings, and also just how to deal with being a new head athletic trainer in a professional league, but doing it in the middle of COVID and how that went. And it was really surprising and awesome to hear how well that went for them and how thoughtful everybody was in the process. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please make sure you consider them if you are in the business of looking for something to order. And as always, if you've got ideas or feedback they want to hear from you, don't hesitate to reach out to them. Without further ado, enjoy this episode. This episode of Athletic Training Chat, we are on with Erin McFarlane, who, as I finally figured out, is actually in the Washington, D.C. area, not in Washington, the state. She had been out west, so I guess I just kind of assumed maybe she was just moving north instead of all the way back east. But I've known Erin for several years now, as she was a graduate assistant at UWL with us, and then moved on to different things and is now working in women's professional soccer, again in Washington, D.C. So that we're going to talk about kind of the transition through all that. Erin's had some unique experiences, really kind of at almost all levels as it goes post high school. Sort of Division II, I think, is the only one you're missing. But just all the things that have gone into that, what the experiences have been like. And then, of course, as we're recording this on November 12th, what things have been like around the pandemic, and how that's worked for her, because we've seen obviously the NBA and their bubble and whatnot, but it sounds like things have worked out really well just talking off air. But before I keep rambling, Erin, I want to turn it over to you just to give whatever more background you'd like to, and kind of introduce yourself to everybody.
All right, sure. So I guess I kind of started off my career at University of Wisconsin, where I was a student there, worked with several different sports. And then after I graduated from Wisconsin, I moved out to Washington State, hence Joel's confusion maybe. But I worked at Washington State University at one point. So I did an internship there working with the track and field team. And so I was out there for a year, and then trying to kind of decide if I wanted to stick with athletic training or if I wanted to go on to PT school. But I decided that I really loved athletic training and I wanted to stick with it. So I started applying for master's programs, and I found UWL, and they have a really good exercise sports science human performance program that really interested me, and had a graduate assistant position available. And so I applied for that and did my master's degree there and worked with the women's soccer team, which was a lot of fun. I really enjoy being around the sport of soccer. And so when an opportunity came up for me to do an internship out in Utah working with a women's professional soccer team, and I could use that to kind of complete my master's degree. Couldn't turn that down, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to go do that. And so I moved out to Utah and started working with the Utah Royals. Loved it out there. Made some good connections with people. And while I was there, I also had the opportunity to work at a high school and in the clinic setting. So like Joel said, I kind of have gone into several different settings and kind of experienced a little bit of everything. But towards the end of that at the end of my internship with the Royals, an opportunity came up to work with the Washington Spirit, which is the women's professional soccer team out here in the DC area. And so yeah, through the connections that I had made with the Royals, I kind of found out about that opportunity and applied and was offered the position as the head athletic trainer, and couldn't turn that down, even though I loved being in Utah. It was a lot of fun out in there in the mountains and hiking and stuff. But yeah, I was just really, really excited to have an opportunity to work as a head athletic trainer with a women's professional soccer team. And so I packed my stuff up and moved out to the East Coast. And so, yeah, now I'm out here, and it's been a very interesting year.
Yes, and I think we'll get into that, because not only getting into that role, which is its own unique thing, doing it in a global pandemic is just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the first question I had kind of ties into everything like you had mentioned and that we've said. Now, you've been in so many different settings, with varying levels of intensity, the requirements, et cetera, resources. We're both alumni of UW-Madison. All the renovations happened after I left, so I didn't get to utilize all of those like you did. But obviously resources aplenty. I'm sure similar at Washington State, and then you come to UWL, and we don't do a bad job, I don't think, but we don't have that big of a budget, and we get to be really creative. But what have you taken or learned, or like what has been unique of each setting that's kind of helped build your skill set, I guess would be a good way to go with it.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I feel like it's kind of crazy how many similarities there are across different settings and stuff. And like at the end of the day, I'm an athletic trainer. I'm treating athletes. My goals and stuff are the same. And so that's what I think what I kind of like too about experiencing so many different settings, is seeing what I like about each one of them and how it is actually similar, even though the setting may be that so different.
Sure.
But yeah, some of the different things that I've noticed between settings is, like you said, resources is a big thing. Like in the Division I setting, you have pretty much anything and everything you could ever need at like most universities, which is really nice, and it makes it, I think, pretty easy to do your job. But there's also a lot of other different types of stressors that come with the Division I setting,
sure.
Like pressures to perform well, pressures coming down from the coaches of like having an injured athlete kind of play through things maybe, or making different decisions on what's safe versus what you can kind of risk in like making those kind of decisions, I think is unique to the Division I setting, and also the professional setting as well. Something that I really like about the Division I setting and the collegiate setting specifically too is that there's so many other athletic trainers that you are kind of surrounded with, and it's really nice to have them right there to kind of bounce ideas off of, and kind of just like chat through different cases that you're seeing. And so that's something that I think was really challenging for me when I moved into like the high school setting. And even here in professional soccer, like I'm the only athletic trainer. I have a lot of other support and like other healthcare professionals that I work with, but I'm really the only one that's like there on site and
Sure.
seeing the athletes and things like that. So yeah, I would say that's one thing that I really liked about the collegiate setting, was just being able to kind of bounce ideas off of my colleagues and things like that.
Understandable.
Yeah. And then I guess my small stint in like clinic setting, I would say the biggest difference there was just like the patient population that you work with and that you
Mhm.
see, and kind of adjustments that you need to make to your treatment plan, and what like rehab exercises look like. You have to be creative in a different type of way than you
Right.
do working with like the very active fit individual. And so that was kind of interesting to kind of like switch my brain a little bit on that, to almost like the opposite of what I was used to doing with like Division 1 or professional athletes, of like, how can I make this exercise more and more challenging?
Sure.
I kind of had to like go take it back and be like, okay, how can I kind of regress this
Yep.
to something that they're able to do, they're comfortable doing. Um, so yeah, that was kind of an interesting challenge there.
I
And
remember.
then just seeing like how athletic trainers kind of fit in that clinic setting was kind of challenging as well.
I remember somebody when teaching us in undergrad, and they were saying how they had gone from the athletic to the clinic setting, and their first like realization was when they told somebody, asked somebody to go warm up for like 10 minutes on the bike, which is, nothing, for most athletes. They just go and they do it. But for this person, like that was like a workout, because it was completely different demographic, and they had to adjust their thinking, because like
Yeah,
that pretty much put them done for the day, as they're working back with some stuff, but it hadn't clicked that there was going to be that different. So
yeah, yeah. Mm.
I'm gonna hold on the pandemic question for just a second, because I'm curious. A, wasn't sure what your structure is, and so maybe at your current job, but it'd be, if you want to lay that out a little bit too, as you answer this kind of question about just the biggest adjustments of being, the head AT, especially at a professional level, because even at UWL, like, yes, you were a graduate assistant, but you pretty much, soccer was yours. Like, it was your team to work with. It's not like it was run, where somebody else was controlling what you were doing with the soccer team. So yeah, what are just the biggest adjustments that you've gone through, not involving the pandemic? And then we'll throw that on at the end.
Okay. Yeah, I would say like the biggest thing for me has honestly been I have an assistant athletic trainer.
Okay.
And so actually figuring out that dynamic has been quite a challenge for me, because I'm not used to like having kind of someone directly like under me, or like that I need to delegate responsibilities
Sure.
to. Like I'm kind of used to it just either being, yeah, just me, or I'm reporting to somebody, not kind of the other way around. So this year has been like a challenge for me, kind of figuring out, okay, how do I kind of establish myself as the head, but also allow my assistant to feel like they are being like that she's being utilized and like is able to use all of her skill sets, and kind of to delegate important responsibilities to her, so that it kind of takes some of the stress off of me,
Mm-hmm.
and like being able to kind of let go of that a little bit and allow her to do that, yeah, has been challenging, but I think I'm getting better at it, and I'm excited for next season to like kind of try to even put a little bit more on her, because it was a little stressful this season, like
Sure.
trying to do as much as I could, but I think I could do a better job at kind of delegating those responsibilities. And then I would say the other thing is that's been an adjustment is kind of just the pressure to make really quick decisions in big moments and things like out on the field, and like I'm working at such a high level and things move so quickly, and you have to decide, okay, is this something that we need to refer, or like where should I refer it to, can they play, I think there's a lot more pressure of like trying to allow athletes to play through things, but then there's also the opposite of like the athlete themselves know like they're getting paid to play soccer,
Sure.
and like their bodies are like a commodity. I don't like they're getting paid to, so they want to take care of themselves.
Yep.
And so like they don't really always want to push through things. And so balancing kind of what they want with what I also think is medically best for them. And then kind of communicating that with the club, with the coaches, with the GM, with the performance director, with like a big team of people that all need to be on the same page as they kind of continue through their return to play progression. That's been kind of challenging, figuring out that kind of dynamic and being confident in my decision making skills on that. So yeah.
I can only imagine, just when it's got that so many things coming down, and I apologize for not having more background on like the specific league. Like it hasn't been around for super long.
No, I think 8 or 9 years.
Okay, it's been around for a while, but yeah, that balance of, you need your stars to play to keep helping drive everything forward, and on the bigger picture. But yes, that those kind of unwritten pressures that they may not
there's
actually
a lot of different things that go into making the decision, not just like, is it in what kind of injury is it? There's like a lot of other factors that play a role in your decision making.
Throw the pandemic on top of that. How has that gone for you? We were talking again off air, just kind of the unique challenges that have been brought up. Sometimes I wish I just worked with a small little team or smaller team. I know they're not. You got to, what are they? Probably 30.
Yeah, we have 25.
25 on roster, so it's still plenty good sized team. But man, sometimes it'd be nice to only have to worry about 25 and not 650. But how has that been this year? On top of all of these other things you're trying to figure out. You already mentioned being stressed, and let's throw on a global pandemic and all the things there. How has that played out for you?
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy from almost day one, just all of the adjustments that have been like needed to be made in order to like continue playing in a safe way. So shortly after I started the position is kind of when things, I don't know, blew up, I guess, or like everything shut down. So we were actually in Florida for a training trip when they kind of shut things down. And so we had only gotten one full training session in down there. And then I think what kind of triggered it was when that NBA player in Utah tested positive.
Mm-hmm.
Then the league kind of decided, all right, let's stop training. And so we had only gotten one full training session down in Florida. And so it was deciding, okay, should we stay there? Should we go back? Is it safe to fly? Or are we safer here where we're at a resort, don't need to leave? Like we have food and like kind of are almost like quarantined already.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of in your own bubble.
Yeah. So, just talking with our team doc and everything, we had decided to actually stay there for a little bit longer. And we did, like they did kind of like individual sessions and we were just kind of monitoring symptoms and checking temperatures and just making sure that we were keeping everything really clean. And but then everything kind of started to shut down at the resort and it was coming towards the end of our stay there anyway. But so we ended up going back a little bit early. And when we got back, everything was just kind of shut down. So that was just like me trying to like having discussions with the league, with the club. I honestly was like not that involved in deciding like if and when we would start training again and how that would look. But towards the end of it, it was like just information coming down from the league of like, here's some of the protocols that we're going to put in place. Like, this is what we need you to implement in order to keep the team safe, but also get back into some training at some capacity.
Yep.
And so kind of what I did during that time that we weren't really training at all was just kind of try to keep checking in on everybody and make sure that they were doing okay, not only physically, but also mentally.
Yep.
And so that was kind of an interesting time too. And just kind of trying to give them remotely like rehab exercises and things to work on, because they did continue to train individually on their own. And so there were still some things that they were dealing with. And so just trying to work with them through that remotely was interesting. So yeah, then in May, we started to kind of phase back in to training. It was challenging. We weren't able to use the facility that we normally would use, so we had to find other areas to train. And so I like would joke around with my assistant, like, oh, we're a traveling circus, like just like going from one place to the other wherever we could find a field, and then making sure that we had like a safe way to get there. We started off training in just groups of 3. Again, making sure that we were monitoring symptoms. If anybody had anything, they stayed at home, and checking temperatures and keeping things wiped down and clean, wearing masks and things like that. And so we just kind of gradually increased our numbers until we were back to full training. And then the league had decided to do a tournament in Utah. And so that was another like really interesting experience too. So all the teams flew out to Salt Lake City, and we did like the bubble thing that a lot of the leagues are doing. So we stayed in a hotel that the hotel that we were at, it was only NWSL teams were there. There weren't any other people. I think there was another hotel that did have other people, but so yeah, like things there, like there were a ton of protocols that were put out to keep everyone like safe and healthy and reduce the risk of like contracting COVID as much as possible. And I think the league did a really great job with it. Like they were asking players and medical staff and everybody for all the advice and like other like little things that they could think of.
That's awesome.
To kind of like minimize and mitigate the risk. And it went really well. They didn't have a single positive case the entire month-long tournament. But it was an intense and stressful period for
I can
sure.
believe that.
You're just like trapped. You're just trapped in a hotel, can't leave except for training and games, and the tournament was really intense too. There were only a few days in between games, but yeah, it was an interesting experience. But like very thankful to be able to have like to be able to play during this time. So yeah, so we did that, and then we left Utah, and they had a couple weeks off. And then the league wanted to continue to try to play a few games. The tournament went so well, and they thought that they could continue to play a few more games safely. And so we came back and we did what they called the fall series.
Okay.
Where they like divided the league into regions, like in pods that we played each other in. In order to reduce the amount of travel. So we did still have to do some traveling, but it was like not as much as what you would do in a regular season. So like our region was DC, over DC, and then we would just play Chicago and New Jersey. And so we played them both home and away, both teams.
Okay.
And that was over, so we would have one game a week. And so that was like a little bit closer to kind of how a normal season would go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we still like had to stay on top of like all all the protocols and things, and make sure that everyone was staying healthy and that we were traveling safely. And so yeah, but we got through that as well with no positives. And yeah, we did testing twice a week. And I actually had to be in charge of that during the fall series. So I administered tests to the whole team and kind of organized when they would come in, and kind of prep the kits for them and then mail them off. We were using a lab out in Washington, so we had to FedEx them overnight out there. So yeah, just working with kind of the medical administrator with the league on organizing that and making sure that all ran smoothly. And then when we get the results, making sure the team doc sees those and kind of communicate that with the team and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of interesting to be in charge of something like that.
I can believe that. Yeah. That's been an interesting thing with us is like, yes, we have like all our COVID protocols, but there's so many like hands coming down trying to, have input. So not only are you getting stuff from the NCAA that maybe isn't necessarily for all the divisions, it's more targeted to one.
Yeah.
But then you've got what the campus is doing and what the county's doing, and and so that it's just like hard to meld it all together and figure out what the heck we're going to do. But it has been an adventure.
It's really complicated when there's so many different areas and levels too.
Yeah, it sounds like what you had mentioned, your league, and kudos to them, of taking all that input with a smaller league compared to obviously the NCAA, and even if you just look at NCAA Division III, there's 400 and some schools in it and 43 conferences. Well, are we all trying to operate under the same thing? What are mandates versus guidelines? What does that mean? Are we actually taking into consideration like the resources or lack thereof? For
so many different variables.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, we've even seen it within our state. Like different schools are utilizing things differently, and it just is what it is. And it's been interesting.
Yeah.
One question I didn't have on there, but you kind of referenced as you were talking about the staff, like a performance director and things like just the staff in that regard. I agree with you. I think you of all the GAs that have been around that have gone through Dr. Wright's program and sports performance specifically, and or I can't remember what human performance or whatever the official title of it is. You seem to take the most advantage of that with your interest in strength and conditioning. And so just how has that benefited you? Have you been able to utilize any of that? Obviously, with you having a performance director, it doesn't really necessarily fall on you, but having that relationship is obviously super important between, both departments with that. Yeah, just if you wouldn't mind commenting on that, since, I think you got not just a background of like, oh yes, I took the CSCS and I passed. Like you did like the whole gamut, and knowing how
sure.
this program is, it's pretty intense.
Yeah, it was. But I really liked it. And I do feel like I got a lot out of it, and it's really helped me, especially in this position, to develop the relationship with the performance director. Unless like you said, I'm not really the one that has to do all that. Like I don't have to put their lifts together or anything like that. Like he does that, but it's really nice to be able to kind of understand where he's coming from when he creates those, and also to be able to kind of make adjustments with athletes who are in later stages of return to play. If they still maybe have some limitations in the weight room, how can I kind of adjust their lift? And like sometimes I can even kind of create their own lift for them to do so that it's very specific to that athlete, which is like what we really try to do at the professional level, is like make everything, like we know how different bodies respond to different things, and we have a lot of technology and things that we can look at to like make those adjustments
Sure.
and to kind of get the most out of, like, even the smallest change makes such a big difference at this level.
Absolutely.
So to kind of be able to have that background and kind of apply that in that way, and to just have better like conversations with the performance director about that, like, hey, I'm seeing this with this athlete, or like what is it, what is their like what do their numbers look like for like distance, so we use stat sports to monitor every training session. And we also utilize that for athletes that are in the return to play program to make sure that they are getting the exposure and the load that they need to be ready to get back into a full training session. And so kind of to have a little bit of that background from my master's degree has been really helpful in like having those types of communications with the performance director and seeing like, oh, we're seeing they got up to this speed, or like what energy systems are we trying to develop here before we get them back in to full training. So yeah, I've found that like my master's degree to be very beneficial in that way.
That's awesome. Everybody who's finishing up their MSAT, don't forget about that side. It's worth knowing something about it. It makes your life so much easier. I think in the long run, because you can talk similar languages, and that's huge.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the last question we had, and we're gonna throw I'm gonna hit you with this one kind of twice, but in two different ways, just because it's similar to the AT chat ones. But knowing what you know now, kind of after a year, 3/4 through your first year, maybe kind of year one, what would you go back and tell yourself kind of moving into it? Like, is there anything that you wish you would have prepared, in hindsight, and been like, man, if I would have thought about doing this at a different level or at a different position, it would have been really helpful as I've moved into this professional rank and this head athletic trainer role?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think just like not being afraid to utilize the connections that you've made throughout your career. And like going back, I think like, I don't know. Well, I'm really glad that I had the internship with the Royals before I moved into this position, and like making the connections there that I did has been like so helpful in me adjusting to this new position. Because I can go back and talk to the athletic trainer that I worked with the Royals and be like, hey, I'm like seeing this, or I'm struggling with that. Like, what advice do you have for me? And I think sometimes young professionals are like afraid to do that, or like think that means that it's going to come across like they don't know what they're doing or things like that. And I think that like the best advice that I would have for somebody would be like, don't be afraid to use your connections. And then because they can also, and then in terms of like networking, like they can also, if you're looking for a new opportunity, a new job opportunity or something, like you never know like who they know or like what kind of positions can come up for you in that way by keeping that. And then, yeah, I think like also just being kind of patient with yourself and not being afraid to make mistakes and kind of learn from that is really important too.
Perfect. Anything else you want to cover just kind of in general before we hop into the AT Chat 5 questions?
No, I don't think so. I feel like we touched on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's been good. No, it's been awesome. It's been very interesting to hear kind of from the inside, working out on how everything's gone. So for the AT Chat questions, where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years? And you can kind of set the example um, in your setting that you're currently in, or just generally. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it will be really interesting to see how things play out with the new entry-level master's degree. I think there's definitely going to be some positive changes that happen because of that shift in education level. I think it'll be interesting to see how. I think like one downside to it is that you may not get as much hands-on experience as early, and I feel like that's going to be like pushed back a little bit. But I think having that higher education, like the entry level education, is going to be really big for the profession and kind of just bring us up to like kind of where all the other healthcare professionals are.
Right.
And I think that will really help gain a lot more respect for our profession, and hopefully more like interprofessional networking and things like that as well. So I also see it. Well, I hope that it kind of starts to affect things like salary.
Yes.
And I also see like kind of a lot of those like lower paid positions kind of going away, or people kind of like athletic trainers starting to kind of demand what they are worth. And I think that's going to be really big for the profession, and again for the level of respect for the profession as well. I also see like a lot of maybe moving into more clinical type settings as well. Like how can athletic trainers be better utilized in like a hospital system or a clinic? Because I think that we have a really good skill set there, and like we're there already, but I think there's a lot of progress that will probably be made over the next few years in that regards.
Agreed. So this is the similar question to the one I asked you earlier, but we'll go a little further back if you want. Is, what advice would you go back and give yourself as a young athletic trainer? And if you could just set when that example was, coming out of undergrad or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I guess I kind of already said this, but I feel like I can't say it enough how big networking is. And I feel like that's how I've gotten every single one of my job opportunities, is by knowing somebody, or somebody who knew somebody, and reaching out to those people. I think is really important, and not like something that a lot of younger people think to do. For like when I apply to a position, not waiting to kind of hear from them, but like reach out and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. Can I talk to you and learn more about this position? And also like exactly that, like asking them questions, and you being the interviewer, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
I think is really important, and something that sometimes young professionals don't do enough of, is making sure that you know what you're getting into.
Yes.
And that it is the best fit for you.
Yep.
I think is really, really important, and can go a long way in how much you like then enjoy that experience.
That's really important.
Yeah. I guess another big thing would be to just like always be looking for ways to improve on your skill set, learning from as many different people as you can, and as many different ways as you can, too, I think is really important. Like I don't think that's one thing that I really like about athletic training, is that I feel like you're never really done learning. There's always something new that comes up, or like research and things like that, or ways that you can improve yourself and your skill set as a clinician. And I think like being able to find those opportunities and to kind of just, always be looking for ways to grow is really important.
Yeah, it's like a gift and a curse because you can never know it all, which is a great thing, but it's so hard to keep up with it at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we've talked about that before too, of like how many different things athletic trainers can do, or like, where you're kind of never really feel like you're a master at anything.
Sure.
You're just like kind of good at a lot of different things.
Lots of tools.
Yeah.
What has been one of the most influential resources you've found in your career thus far?
I guess I would have to, I just go back and say like networking.
Perfect. Yep, it's a common theme that it came up a lot more than I thought when we started this, that people have said that, which is perfect.
Really?
Yep, but I think it's
Yeah, honestly, I feel like that's the biggest resource is, having people to talk to about things, what you're seeing, and yeah.
perfect. If you could go and change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a mindset, or a common practice within the profession, what would it be?
When you gave me these questions, I actually had a really hard time with this one,
Yeah.
thinking through it, because I think there's so many other things that people are like, oh, I don't think, like, there's not the research behind this. Like, this doesn't really actually do what we think it's doing. But I honestly feel like there's a place for almost anything that we try, whether it's like actually physiologically doing something. I think the psychological component of it is big too, and to have like the biggest toolbox that you possibly can, because every athlete is different, every patient is different, and they might respond to one thing that another patient doesn't respond to.
Sure.
And I think that it's really important to have like a wide range of things in your toolbox to try, even if it's something like, I don't know, there's like big discussions about ice is not what we think it is, but I feel like if the patient thinks it's helping, like, why not do it?
I can understand that. Yeah, there's always that argument in the Twitter sphere about evidence, just the evidence based practice and what does that look like, and the continuum versus patient centered care. And
I think explaining to athletes too is kind of important, or your patients, of like, well, like, this is theoretically what we're looking for, what we see has been beneficial using this specific treatment, or something, and letting them know that, or like what your goal is with that specific treatment plan for them. And that's when I feel like you honestly get the best results, is if the patient is on board and knows like what your plan for them is. And then I almost feel like almost anything can work for them. And then also like listening to them as well, because they can often tell you kind of what works best for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. It's been its own interesting process in just talking with them, and not necessarily pushing them away from something, but just having, like you said, that conversation of like, just using ice as an example. Like, yes, you could use ice, but I think maybe would get a better result from doing this, that, or the other thing. And maybe slowly building that buy-in. But if ultimately the bag of ice is what's going to get you ready to go, it's not, that's what it is, and that's fine. And that's why we still buy ice bags. Final question. What does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
Yeah, another really good question. I think I think that it's like an opportunity to develop deep relationships with the patients. I think something that's really unique about the athletic training setting is that we have the opportunity to get to know our patients outside of their injury, like throughout the whole injury process. And yeah, we get to see them from the moment we're the first person that responds from the moment they get hurt,
Mm-hmm.
through to when they're getting back to like the sport that they love and to play with. And so to me, I think it's just athletic training is developing those deep connections, with your patients and kind of like making a difference in their lives. And like I just really like what I do so much that sometimes it doesn't even feel like work to me. It's
Sure.
just kind of like you're going in to help people and make a difference.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, with that, anything else you would like to share?
uh I don't think so.
If people wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to reach out or, ask questions or whatever it may be?
Um, yeah, I mean, I can give my email, and then I also um, I have Twitter, but I honestly don't use it that much.
Fair enough.
So yeah, my email for work is emcfarlane@washspirit.com. And then I guess I don't even remember what my Twitter handle is.
We can try and look it up and link it up. We'll see what we can find.
Let's see. Oh, it's at Erin MCF93.
Got it. So we will link that up on the page for it to make sure people can reach out. Well, it's been great catching up. Thank you for being on,
Yeah, it was great being here.
and we will be in touch soon.